This episode is brought to you by Self-Care for Diabetes, a virtual online program that's doing diabetes care differently.
We don't tell you to lose weight. Instead, we help you create positive and meaningful changes that make your life with diabetes better than before. Visit selfcareforddiabetes.com to learn more.
Welcome to the Body Kindness Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Scritchfield, and I'm here to help you find your inner caregiver. You'll have more compassion, less shame, and the tools you need to deal with a culture that just does not want you to be free to give yourself fierce love. You are welcome and you belong in our community, where we value your well-being, we share our experiences and support each other on the body kindness journey, and we know that your health and your worth is not dependent on your weight. If you would like to enjoy self-care, be less self-critical, and make your life about more than your health routines, join us at bodykindnessbook.com/start. Anxiety Sisters, welcome to Body Kindness.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're so delighted to be here with you.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this conversation. I'm so excited to talk about the book and all the wonderful, I love the book. Let me just put that out there right now. This is a book everyone needs to have, and that's going to be most of what we talk about, but I'm sure listeners would love to know who you are. So can you please introduce yourself to the listeners of Body Kindness?
Sure. I'm Abbe Greenberg. In the community, they call me Abs, but I respond to really anything. Anything that starts with an A. I'm like, yeah, whatever. My background, my graduate work was in communication, very specifically in self-talk.
Ooh.
And my job up until 2017, when Mags and I decided to do Anxiety Sisters full time, I was a professor of communication. So that's my professional background. And my personal background is I am first and foremost an anxiety sufferer. So Mags and I always say we've not only walked the walk, but we've huddled, heaved, hurled, sweated, palpitated, and hyperventilated our way. We get it. And so we wrote this book and we run this community from the perspective of sufferers, even though we've been doing research for the last 10 years and we do the neuroscience part of it and all that kind of stuff too, but we definitely identify as sufferers first and foremost. So that's a little about me.
Great.
I'm Maggie Sarachek, and Mags is how I identify in the Anxiety Sisters. But again, I too answer to just about everything. And I am a lifelong anxiety sister and a trained social worker. So Abby and I have really combined our two specialties, which is the communications piece, which is so much of handling anxiety, and the sort of traditional mental health piece and the community piece, and kind of put it all together for Anxiety Sisters. So but we always say that we come at this from a very informed but a sufferer's perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so many things I'm thinking about. One is like you read your own book because I consumed it in an audiobook, and I just loved it that way. And I love listening to your voices and how you put it all together. It's so awesome. And I also love how you shared these. You do a lot of. It's just there's so many great things to learn, and I found it really easy to learn. And I found it so great to learn through the stories and the eyes of others. And I think you said there's like over 300 examples and stories in the book. But the way you delivered it in these like little bites was so great. And the other thing I want to say is that what I loved, this is going to sound so weird. I was like, is this going to come out right? But it's like, as I was listening, there was this like delightfulness aspect of it where I was like, they're making anxiety fun and cool. And as someone with anxiety too, and I don't know I don't know if you know this, and I guess listeners would appreciate this, but Abs and I actually met at like my body kindness retreat, and that was so fun to get to know each other then. And I remember the Anxiety Sisters was around and thriving, and I know there was that hint of like wanting to write a book, which is so great. But I don't know where I was at then with kids and their ages, but my older daughter has an anxiety disorder that we had diagnosed at 4. And so, and it, me coming to terms with my anxiety was, I remember this night and I was walking past my husband and I was kind of shook and I was like, what happens when the helper needs help? I looked at him and I asked that question and I was like, this doesn't feel like depression. And there was all these, and I ended up getting these rashes, the anxiety rash, and my body. That was how I really had the sign. Was when I went to the doctor. I got a dose, 1 round of prednisone, referral to dermatologist, and they're like, "We just think this is anxiety rash. It just looks like psoriasis and poison ivy and like candida under your boobs." Because it was all over. So I was like, okay, I think this is anxiety. So I totally identify as an anxiety sister now too, and an anxiety family. And so yeah, it was great too for me to have this, to listen to these lovely voices and to not feel alone with all these other stories and to be like, yeah, anxiety is cool, real cool.
I don't know if I've ever been identified as the cool group, but that's exciting.
We could be a cool group, I think.
Yeah. Well, that was part of what Mags and I wanted to do. That's the reason that we branded this as the Anxiety Sisters as opposed to something more clinical.
Yeah.
Because we want people to feel really comfortable with their anxiety. I mean, anxiety is human, right? It's a human emotion. Every human being on the planet has experienced anxiety at some point, right? Some of us have disorders and some of us don't, but we all experienced it. So what Mags and I wanted to do was really demystify that experience for people so that they didn't feel so ashamed or stigmatized by anxiety, particularly when it becomes a disorder, which we know happens, right? Mental health, there's a lot of stigma and shame around that. And so we thought the first thing we should do is just, let's just be ourselves and, we're goofballs. So let's let people know what it's like to live well with anxiety and be happy people, even though we are still anxiety sufferers and we always will be.
And you got to share your tagline because I just love the.
Oh, Anxiety Sisters don't go it alone.
Yes.
Sisters don't go it alone, which Abbe and I can't say together.
Yeah, on the end of our podcast, we always end it with, and remember, and we're supposed to say together, Anxiety Sisters don't go it alone, but we have never been able to say it together at the same time, and it ends up being, we're yelling at each other, and we're redoing it. It's a nightmare.
Okay. So this is fun. Okay. So do we want to be like Anxiety Sisters, pause, don't go it alone? Is that the kind of, okay. We're going to try this in 3.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to give a countdown, 3, 2, and then point. And when I point, we're going to say Anxiety Sisters, pause, don't go it alone. Okay, ready? Okay, here we go. We're going to try. Ready? So 3, 2, Anxiety Sisters, don't go alone.
It's hard.
Yay, that was a good effort, right?
Good effort. I was really trying to watch you, but yeah.
Well, in all of our proof that we could feel that energy of like, I hope I get it right, and try something fun out. So we'll keep on trying, but I love that tagline. It just, I think we can feel so alone and lots of shame, whether it be around the diagnosis or meds or, the things we need to do to care for ourselves when we're in an anxiety wave. And so in terms of when I think of relating to body kindness and the 3 pillars, that idea of being able to connect to your body and how important that is for noticing how anxiety is showing up for you in your body. And you have so many great tips for that. But then also in connecting to others, and that there is a value in not being alone. And so to have other people who know what it's like and who can be there and just listen is really important for the whole process of healing and this and that. So I just think it's I just resonate so much with that idea about connection and being together. It's really powerful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know your online presence is hugely popular and really engaged. And do you want to talk a little bit more about like who's invited to the community and how they can belong and things like that? And then we'll get into some nitty gritty about the book.
Sure. Well, we are called the Anxiety Sisters, but that's because we look at each other as soul sisters, and we definitely fight like sisters. We always say, but we are really We're really an anxiety community, and so anyone of any gender is welcome in our community. Any gender identification, anyone who has anxiety or loves someone that has anxiety. So is invited into our community. And, we have a Facebook page that's a very active place. Anxiety, just go to Anxiety Sisters. And we have an Instagram, we're at the Anxiety Sisters, and we have the Spin Cycle with the Anxiety Sisters, which is our podcast. And we have our website, www.anxietysisters.com. So those are really simple ways in to our community.
Yes, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I will have all those links in the show notes for everyone.
Great.
You mentioned the spin cycle, which to me is a good segue into the book, because speaking of that, besides, oh, this feels cool or fun or interesting, I think the way you use terminology, like it is legit science, right? And facts and science and truth. And it's like, it tastes like ice cream, right? Which Haagen-Dazs and Ben & Jerry's was mentioned several times, I think. But
Yes.
but that sort of pleasure you feel you might get when like you're enjoying a dessert, that pleasure feeling, that's what the book can feel like. And I think a lot of it is in your words and how you present things. And I love the idea of starting with the spin cycle, which you mentioned is the name of your podcast, but you talk about spinning in terms of what anxiety can feel like. So can we start to break that down and what you did for people in the book with your words, like spinning and floating? I think those were two that I was interested in.
Well, very deliberate on our parts. I have been studying how talk works and how language shapes our experiences for 25 years or more. So that was really important to both of us, that we use language that was as welcoming and as accessible as we ourselves are trying to be.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the difficulties we found in other mental health books, written by fantastic people, really smart people, but some of the language was very distancing or prescriptive. And both of those things made it challenging for us as anxiety sufferers. So what we had said is when we write this book, we're going to write it like two girlfriends having coffee and talking about anxiety, because it's already scary. We don't want to be intimidating. We don't want to use jargon that might frighten people. And also, like I said, language shapes our experience. So for me and Mags, when we use the word panic, our brains think it's a command.
And go.
Exactly. So for us, spinning is our metaphor, which we feel for most people is pretty apt. I mean, or spin cycle, you've been in the washing machine. That's pretty much an anxiety attack right there. If you want to know what it feels like, jump in your washing machine. Yeah. You'll come out drenched and like thinking you're going to die. But so we came up with spinning because it's a way to talk about the experience of anxiety that, number one, is metaphoric so people can really identify with it. And number two, it's not so scary. So we have people in our community saying all the time now, yeah, when I'm spinning or when I go out for a spin, because when we say the word anxiety attack, think about how that sounds. It can make the heart quicken. So we've done that with, like you brought up floating. Floating is our term for dissociation or depersonalization, which is, that's the clinical term for when you sort of leave your own body during an anxiety experience or another experience, where the first time I ever did it, I felt like I was floating above myself. And it was so terrifying. I was sure I was dying because how else could I have gotten out of my body? I mean, so Mags and I decided that we wanted to call that something a little friendlier, so we could talk about it and not be scary. And we said, well, it feels like you're kind of floating up there.
It's brilliant. And it really is effective because it allows you to kind of regulate your feelings a little bit and maybe be, kind of in an inner caregiver mode, a little bit more open, a little bit more curious and compassionate, a little bit more interested, so that the biggest worried part of you can maybe kind of slow down a little bit and um, you know, start approaching this with a bit more hope and confidence instead of that, what again, that sort of pathology and the distancing, it feeling is like, oh, I better run away from this because that is too scary. Can't handle it. So it's just really, really brilliant and necessary. And it's one of my favorite things about what you do in the book is just when we can allow something scary to be there and allow our feelings to exist while we think about, a sense of curiosity and openness, we're grounded and can take in the information, and then we're more likely to be helped. So I just love it so much.
Thank you.
Well, it was partly also that we wrote the book that we so wanted and needed. And I still always call Abby up and I say, I was just reading it. I'm having a tough day. So I was just reading our book. Believe it or not, I still do it. But when we were really at the height of our anxiety disorders, I would say, and really struggling, we went out to a bookstore one day because that's what we always did. We were book people. So we'd go out to bookstores and went to the anxiety section, and a few minutes there, Abby turned to me. She said, I have to leave and I got to go take something to calm down. Like I'm not in a good place right now. And I understood that because we would pick up these books and they were so detached and clinical and so prescriptive of all the things we should be doing. And we were both in this point at different points in our lives. We've both been, at a point where we could barely leave the couch. So telling us to do certain things or eat a certain way or, take medication or don't take medication or do this type of therapy or that type of therapy, it was all too overwhelming and threw us even more into ourselves and into the anxiety. So we said, like, what did we need? What did we need so much in a book? And that's kind of formed the basis for us of the book.
How do you hope people interact with your book?
Often.
Um,
Well, we wrote it, Mags it was important to Mags that it be the kind of book where you could pick it up and read a few pages and put it down and have an experience with that. And I think that we managed to accomplish that you can start anywhere in the book and you can read a few pages, and if it speaks to you, you can put the book down and that will have been a nice nugget. Like there's a lot of information in the book. And so you don't have to take it all in one sitting. It's the kind of thing where you can pick it up and put it down. It's like body kindness in that way. I mean, you know how much I love body kindness. And back when Mags and I were first doing workshops in 2017, I don't know if you remember this, I took your book with us.
Yay!
You were giving away your book. You had autographed them for us, and we were giving away your book in our, like, raffling them off in our workshops. People just love your book. But what I love about your book is that I just, even now, I'll pick it up and I'll just read a few pages or look at one of those gorgeous graphics. And that's all I need. That's a chunk. It's enough for me to digest and think about. And the inner critic versus the inner advocate, I can go to that part, and look at that and get something from it. So we wanted to mimic that in our book as well.
When I was listening to your book and there were all these different scenarios, sometimes I was out in the forest and just looking at the sights and sounds. And there was one time where I was just, getting through the day, and one of our COVID purchases was this rower, so I was like, I'm going to listen to them and look at this scene. It was like somewhere in the tropics where I haven't been in forever, and just going like this. And I think I was listening to some of the stuff on medications, which I loved, like A++++. But as I got further and further, I was like, this is like body kindness for people with anxiety. Like it couldn't have been, it was like Cinderella's glass slipper or something. It really, which for me felt so great to know, like, you're the perfect people to write this. And it was such this kind of pleasure. And just this joyful, I don't know why I feel like saying the word relief, but I guess in some way it's like the helper part of me worries about unmet needs and this and that, and it's like, great, this is a great resource that I can recommend to people and community and this and that. And it's just like with this, it's more of what the world needs. And so I feel that connection too.
You're
And
comparing it to body kindness is such a compliment. And I think the reason that you and I hit it off
yeah,
way back in 2018 when we met, and
yeah,
I was a participant in your body kindness workshop,
yeah,
I think in Vermont. And I think the reason you and I hit it off was because we have similar approaches. In
yeah.
other words, we feel like there's enough difficulty and shame out there
Mm-hmm.
around our bodies, around our anxiety. There's so many things
Mm-hmm.
that we feel. And I think you and I both, and Mags too, obviously, the three of us feel it's so important
Mm-hmm.
to get rid of that blame and shame. You can live happily with any size body, but not with shame.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I definitely want to hit on that. Before we hit on that, I want to talk about the meds, because my sense in terms of the meds was like, it was so great. It really was non-pathologizing. And I was like, ooh, they're being like Switzerland with the meds, right? Like, and this sort of like, and I can imagine this delicate, like we want to share what we see as the problems and the stigma around meds. And I felt it's like they're really working hard at empowering people to be the expert in their choices, and that it might be a lot of experimenting, and that's okay. And it like, for me, I mean, first of all, it helped me from an education standpoint. It really, and this is great, like we said, anyone has an anxiety, so anyone can be helped by this book, whether or not, like you said, you had a clinical diagnosed anxiety disorder or you want to relate to your anxiety better. But any helping pro that's listening, like the meds section alone will help you speak with a better sense of confidence about what's out there and how to help people process an empowered decision. So talk to me for a little bit about your intention around writing about meds. What do you see in terms of shame, diagnosis shame, meds shame, and what is it you want listeners to know about regarding meds?
Well, that was a big question, but I think that our basic stance on medication is
Mhm.
that there should be no more shame in taking medication for anxiety or depression or any other kind of brain health or mental health than than there is for taking, people aren't ashamed to take aspirin, or people aren't ashamed to take their diabetes medicine, hopefully, or their heart medicine, or
Mhm.
whatever other medicines they need to take. And that, so we want the shame part to we really want to focus on not shaming anyone for any decision they make in terms of anxiety treatment. And then the thing with the meds that we have found is that a lot of people go to the doctor and they're kind of thrown some meds, literally, try
Mhm.
this. Sometimes it's a sample and sometimes it's a prescription. And often they aren't given very much information about like what kind of med this is, what are possible effects of the med, or what do we want to look out for? What do we want to know about? Or why they're even getting that not meditation, but
Although
medications.
meditation is good and you cover it in the
That would
book.
be good too. Um, but so part of what we really wanted to do is say, we want to explain as much to you as we can so you have some real information. And then we really want to help you become informed about how to talk to your doctor. Like, what questions should you be asking? Because I know when Abs and I first got medication, we didn't know what questions to ask. We were just like, oh,
Mhm.
okay. And so, what questions should you be asking your doctor, your pharmacist, your nurse practitioner? Um, what things have we learned about medication from the Anxiety Sisterhood that the medical establishment often doesn't talk to us much about?
And that's the hot stuff, right? We
Yeah.
want that. We don't want to, we know we need medicine, but there's flaws in medicine, and
Oh,
they can't have all the power and control. We have to trust ourselves and have this community where people can share real lived experiences and, and then do our best to work within the system. But we all know that there are changes that need to make. And I think absolutely that's a key juicy element that you bring to the book as well.
Yes, we like to say these cherries come with some serious pits.
Mm.
That's and
we
we
don't
both
call them side effects. We call them front and center
because they really are front and center effects. And
Yeah.
some of them, doctors will really not only not tell you about, but they'll really deny, like weight gain, which is one of the effects. And we just have hundreds of anxiety sisters saying, "Oh, I never had a weight problem. And then I gained, this amount of weight, or I had a weight problem and then I gained even more weight." And so, yeah, I mean, it might not be the reason not to take the medication, but it's not helpful when the doctor says, "Oh, maybe you'll gain 1 or 2 pounds."
Or they tell you that, "Oh no, you're only gaining weight because you're feeling better."
Yeah.
That's a big one. A big one in the medical establishment. And so we went through a lot of research. We went through a bunch of studies, and we really in the book presented the real truth about things like weight gain and SSRIs, which are the common antidepressants that people take, like Prozac or Zoloft, and also sexual side effects. You and I have talked a lot about sexual stuff, and we were bonding over that with this podcast. Because, Mags and I believe that, sexual health is part of health.
Yeah.
It's a worthy pursuit.
Yeah.
To have a good sex life. That's important.
Yeah.
And that can be a problem with some of these medicines. So we talk about it very honestly and about possible solutions.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a segue over into some conversation around shame and body shame. And I see a strong, enmeshment in, how we relate to our bodies and the inner critic and this and that, and how it can trigger anxiety. And, it's really interesting to me because, we deserve a world that doesn't judge people based on their body size anyway, and that there's no hierarchy. So, I like to use the word weight concerns, right? It's like when somebody is approaching, say, just a medication question, and, they might already have a weight concern just related to living in this world, or, they might, be busy and stressed and not doing, enjoyable physical activity. And, by, say, approaching physical activity and how strength training could help, process, emotions, and could be one of the ways that we were, help keep ourselves regulated and help with anxiety. And, there's lots of positive benefits of movement, right? But what a person will come and bring to is like, I got to do something about this weight, right? And then it's already, you can't exist in your body as it is right now, right? Even if you're wondering about possible changes to your eating patterns or possible changes to exercise, you already don't have permission to exist in that body. And so now it's even more threatening about, here's a med that could really, really help you have a better life, a happier life, a holistically happier life. And again, it's like that sort of this denial or lack of information. Like, what if weight gain wasn't a bad thing? It's culturally a bad thing. And now this potentially helpful medication you might want to run away from because you already can't exist in your body. So it's like madness. It's, to me, the root of the problem is that we're comparing good bodies and bad bodies, and that we can't try to find our best life with the best, medication plan and self-care plan together. Like, that's the real harm to me.
Well, I think Abby and I both, and we talk about this a little bit in the book too, but we would both say that weight concerns and the conversation many of us heard around our own weights from the time we hit puberty, I would say. Some people before they hit puberty, but certainly like by the time you hit puberty, often as a woman in this culture, it feels like your body becomes there for public consumption and public comment. And that is a massive cause of anxiety for many of us. It's like that first real shaming piece of like, oh, my body wasn't supposed to develop, or I'm not supposed to, there's all these things I'm not supposed to do, or that I'll be criticized for around my body size. And that there is no doubt in our minds that for the two of us and for many women we talk to, that's really connected to their anxiety disorder, is this this idea that other people are allowed to comment on your body size.
And we both believe that practicing body kindness, which we learned from you, is a pathway.
Yeah.
It's a path to, because the same acceptance that you teach about, rejoicing in the body you're in right today, right this minute, celebrating what your body can do right now, however it looks, it doesn't matter. It's how this body is, how it is to be in your own body, and that acceptance of that as one of your stepping stones. It's also a stepping stone to managing your anxiety. You have to accept it as part of your life, because truthfully, for most of us, it's not going to go away. We're going to learn to manage it. We're going to learn to accept it and live well with it. There's lots of tools for that. And like you said, there's lots of choices people can make. But there's a need to be kind to yourself, to your body and to your mind.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I can just, I think in terms of making room for both things. And I remember this coming out in your book too, because it reminds me of something I mentioned with clients, but it's like that yes and effect. So it's, yes, I can fully accept that I'm bringing with me all my past experiences, all the messages I've been told about my worth and my health and all these things. And there's a lot of pain that's part of that, right? And I could bring that there while I stop and think about what really matters to me. And it's possible that you might see some gaps in your sleep routines and want to make positive changes there, or that you do want to build a healthier relationship with movement. And, I say over and again, and I remember mentioning, it's like some of the people who get the best benefits for body image and best benefits for exercise, it's when they move their bodies without trying to change them. And when you learn about how movement can be good for anxiety as well, it's like connecting to those wins. And so find your own reasons why you might engage in movement. And so how that might thread into, yes, absolutely. You might try some meds that work for you. And if you are noticing a weight change with the meds and also improvement in your mental health, right? Keep allowing that yes and. Let me look at the ways I am caring for myself. I'm being compassionate. I'm being kind. I am able to get rest. I'm relating differently and better to my anxiety. I'm connecting positive compassion to movement, and I'm not moralizing food, but I am eating in a connected way where I'm enjoying food for pleasure. And it's like, there might be that moment where you do notice that there is, an increase in your weight. And yes, it could be in part of medication, right? And what would it look like to accept that? And when you feel that emotional pain, is that also not part of what you've brought from the past experience? And can we allow some of that pain to look outward, less inward, and like that shame, blame, and more outward? I live in an unjust world where what part of what makes this painful is not all these ways, this whole checklist and way my life is better, but the world that says I can't access all these good things unless I'm thinner and less and take up less space, and put that anger elsewhere so that you can allow this better life to take hold.
I mean, I think that's been such a discussion at times on our on Anxiety Sisters, even on our Facebook page, because so many women, I include myself in this, but there wasn't a place to put all that sort of anger and anxiety around what we now realize is like, well, why did all these people have a right to comment even on my body shape and size? And so, but we've internalized it too. You know what I mean? We've also internalized it. And so it does have a lot to do with anxiety. Like Abby was really careful, and I totally was 100% behind this, that we talked a lot about movement, not exercise. We said we hate exercise, we love movement.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about movement because we happen to know that it is one of the things that really helps, and different kinds of movement help different people at different times. But we know that, being out in nature really helps with anxiety. We know that movement can really help people stabilize their anxiety. But we don't want to judge it as like, you must do this right now,
Right.
because there are different times in your anxiety journey where some things are possible and some things aren't. But, Abby always says, like, even a little counts,
Mhm.
a little counts, because that is like the building block of helping yourself. So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, and I think it comes back to empowerment too, that it's, like, I think ultimately, we're constantly kind of practicing this, because we're always thinking tons of thoughts, right? And it's not that we can tell our thoughts to go away or whatnot, but we can choose how we relate to them. And I think if it's that grounded connection to what is it that I want to create for myself? And, um, you know, yeah, I just think if we can just allow this frame, that we get to claim, this is what I want to think about movement. This is what I want to think about eating
mhm,
patterns. And I guess we're talking about it in terms of, like, we can't just dance around that, like, bodies are, still in this culture. They are compared, and there is this value, and we cannot do anything about um the ways in which um anxiety about our bodies might show up and might make us second guess a med choice or something else. And it's like, no, you always have your body autonomy, but possibly start to question, right? My fear about experimenting with this med, right? It's dominant about, like, notice what feels dominant about a weight gain fear. And then making sense of that, the way the culture might put that message in there. And also, how is it that I know that I have the power to care for myself in different ways? And I guess so it's less about trying to control your body at all. And what would it feel like to, like, just let go of that feeling and allow what could be good about experimenting with this med, and to trust that you already have these other tools and skills and ways to care for yourself. And I guess just to be more open, because you really don't know what would happen. And that maybe, just maybe, you might notice that if there is a body change that's part of your journey, that by anchoring yourself in body kindness too, that overall you're on the path to this better life, that might just allow that all to be okay, because it
mhm.
really was society saying it wasn't after all. So that's what I would hope for people too.
Yeah. Yeah. And the truth is that suffering from anxiety is a terribly lonely and insidious thing.
Mhm.
And so Mags and I, our personal take for ourselves has been, we'd rather be, a little bigger but not anxious, because that allows us to live our best lives.
Mhm.
Um, it did require, though, body kindness to do that.
Mhm. I think it
It
does.
required a sense of, of our own ownership of our own bodies, as opposed to public ownership of our bodies.
Well, Abby always reminds me of a story that I told her when I was really having terrible, terrible anxiety. I can't eat or keep food down when I'm anxious.
Mhm.
It is not a eating
Mhm.
disorder. It's literally physically, I
Mhm.
feel
That
my,
vagus nerve is like,
yeah, going crazy. And so I tend to lose a lot. I would lose a lot of weight.
Mhm.
And my very loving, wonderful mother, um, said to me one time, she knew I couldn't get to work. I could
Mhm.
barely leave my house, but I had lost a lot of weight. And she said to me, I don't know how you feel, but you look incredible.
Ugh.
You know, because to her, for so many different reasons that,
Mhm.
you know, for her, it's like my health and safety was around my weight.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that, many, many of us have had that experience. So it's really very much about deciding, not just deciding, but being okay what's okay for us.
Mhm.
What's important for us in our lives. Now, I couldn't get out of the house.
Mhm.
I'm talking, I could not get out of the house. And so all the things that we always say, all the things we talk about in our book, and we don't think medication's for everyone at
Mhm.
all, at
Mhm.
all. But all the things we talk about in our book, like it's great if we tell you to go do this or go do that, even movement is great. But if you were like us at times and could not get off your couch,
Mhm.
it was hard to incorporate any of the other pieces because our book
Right.
is not primarily about medication, but
Right.
we realize there are times where, when your life is really at a place of being impacted so greatly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. It really is one chapter of the book, but I think it really hit the nail on the head for that all this stigma and shame that exists. And it's like I said, it's got all these great stories, highly accessible, a lot of practical skills. Like I love the idea. I can't remember what you called it, but like the worry bag or something. It was like, oh,
the
I've got
spin kit,
lemon drops in it. Go ahead.
the
Eh,
spin kit.
yeah, the spin kit.
Yes.
Yeah, I just love that, and it's even just taking it with you. It's the little security blanket. Hey, it's here if I need it. I just love you did all kinds of experiments and tried out different things and um uh, you know things were surprisingly beneficial that you didn't think would work. And so it's I think, when you're in that mode of like, I don't think I can handle this feeling for very long, and you feel stuck, like I don't think I could do anything about it, this book is going to change your life because you're going to get lots of insight, lots of ideas, lots of aha moments, lots of light bulbs going off for me. And you're absolutely right. You get to a part, it's like, oh, that's really practical. Let me try this or that. And I found myself, like I said, just recommending it to clients. And I'll say, I listened to it. I really felt comforted by their voices and I loved it. But obviously, you can also buy it and read for joy and circle things and make little, but it's more about like, let me try this out and see. And um I have to say, I thought about both of you yesterday, and I was having a really bad day, rough headache and all these things, and randomly found this Rogue 45 minutes, and I couldn't make it to a floating tank, but I turned my bath water on and poured the lavender Epsom salts in there and just kind of laid down, and it was so nice. And it just, yeah, I felt connected to you in the book and all these really just helpful, powerful tools that I would say that anyone can really listen to because you're going to help them understand what anxiety is, the things that go on in your brain. And if you care about someone who struggles with anxiety, and I think reading through it yourself to better understand them is really powerful. And because back to the no one goes it alone, I think that you can find ways to help yourself, to help others, or better understand others. You help people better communicate, find the words to communicate when they're dealing with their anxiety so others can understand. And it's just kind of A plus. I love it. And I really hope people get it and listen to it. And before we wrap up, what I wanted to hear you say is like just what, either share like a favorite part of writing it or favorite part of the book, or um maybe something that you hope that people get out of it.
Okay, so my favorite part of the book was writing it with my best friend.
Oh.
I mean, we started out as a little sorority of just two of us. We were our own Anxiety Sisters Club way back in 1987, I think it was when we met, 86, 87. And she was my lifeline. Of all the things that we ever tried, the thing that helped both of us the most has been our connection to each other.
Spiral up.
Even when we fight like sisters, which we do.
Yes.
And we did that plenty right in the book too.
Yeah.
But
There are a few hang-ups. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
hang-ups. Yeah, because we had to write the entire book on the phone since it was during the pandemic.
Wow.
And
Yes.
Max is in Ohio and I'm in New Jersey, so we couldn't travel to see each other. So we literally wrote the entire book on the phone. But so my favorite part was doing it with Max. And I think the big takeaway that I would say to people is that anxiety is a disorder. It's not a decision. They're not your fault. You haven't done anything wrong. You're not flaky. You're not unreliable. You don't have a moral failing if you are experiencing anxiety and it's interrupting your life, but it's treatable. there are ways to feel better and to live well with anxiety. So don't go it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out, come to our Facebook page, go to our website, hit our panic button. It's all free. And you can be part of a community that really understands you and understands what you're going through. Don't suffer
Mm-hmm.
more than you already have, because it's really, struggling with anxiety is isolating enough. Come join us.
Oh, I guess it's my turn. I'm sorry. I got involved in listening to Abby. I think that the takeaway from the book is there's a couple of takeaways, and like Abby said, it's a disorder, not a decision. Also, that there's no one size fits all for managing anxiety, right? So we're really careful in the book. We never tell anyone what they should be doing, because there's no one thing that's going to help everyone. So we have techniques in the book that will help you if you're sitting on your couch and you're thinking about going out and you're anxious. We have techniques that are sort of a little bit more of lifestyle changes, like to keep yourself more steady. But we also have techniques to use at the moment. So if you need something now, we have stuff for you. And then the stories are so important, because just like you said, you got a rash. I think a lot of people don't realize that when they get a rash, it could be anxiety, right? I mean, that's not an easy
I
thing
think I
to
had 5 different looking rashes. So
Yeah.
it was determined to tell me, go see somebody.
And we hear about that now all the time. Rashes are one of the very common symptoms that we hear about. But I think part of what is great about the stories is that you will find people with all different kinds of situations and symptoms, and people who've tried all different kinds of treatments. And so there's like something, I can't imagine reading this book and not being able to relate to someone, and not being able to find a few techniques that you just find are helpful. So
And that, the value and the worth of that is absolutely priceless. And so the book is called The Anxiety Sisters Survival Guide: How You Can Become More Hopeful, Connected, and Happy. And it is a book that definitely delivers on its promise. And I'm going to give it the Rebecca Scritchfield stamp of approval. So there it is. And Abs and Mags, thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank you so much for talking with me. It's been a pleasure and a joy. And I can't wait to see you soon in real life. That would be lovely.
Yes, now that we're getting past some of the stickiest parts of the pandemic, we can make a field trip.
Yes, we'll have fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? Visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.